Everyone. Welcome to our, what is this, third masterclass. We've got Kevin Nevsimal here. Kevin's been with us for a while as well. He's designed many shows, works for a lot of groups, and he's very into using different devices in order to design efficiently. So, Kevin, if you'd like to say something about yourself.
Yeah, I'm originally from Wheaton, Illinois. I was a French horn player. My marching experience included I marched 4 years with the Cavaliers. And it was always the visual aspect that really interested me. So I think that's why I really got into the drill writing thing. Having marched Michael Gaines's drill and just kind of studying that, and he was always my biggest idol when it came to drill writing. But now it's just watching everyone's and taking a little bit. As far as the shortcuts, when I started writing drill, eventually at one point I got to about 16 groups. And it was just, I was really slow with everything I did. So I took a little bit of time to relearn the program and to just figure out ways that I could do things faster so that I could finish more shows in the same amount of time. So that's what I'm going to be going over here is a few things that have helped me with my writing and speed things up and make things happen quicker. So first I want to talk about the fact that one of the coolest things with Pyware is the fact that we can customize anything we want. You can make pretty much every function with the program can be a shortcut. And so you just need to figure out there's some shortcuts that everyone's going to use. And then there are shortcuts that will help speed up each individual's writing. First, I want to talk about the mouse that I use. And this has been mentioned on a few of the Pyware user forums. This is the Logitech G604. The cool thing about this mouse is if you notice on the side there, it has 6 programmable shortcut buttons. So 6. It has 2 more up there by the index finger, so 7, 8. And plus this quick scroll wheel can also be a button, so you can click that. So it has 9 buttons that you can customize with it. For me personally, the way that I speed things up, I use this. I have the bottom 3 buttons programmed for the different selection tools. So the pointer tool, the lasso tool, and the box tool. And then I have the top 3 buttons are 3 of the drawing tools that I use the most, or 3 editing tools that I use the most. I think I have adjuster, morph, and push, just because I personally use those the most. These top buttons I have for, get it where you can see it. These top buttons I have for the knife and the glue. And then this one I have for the toggle into the zoom mode. So I can just click this, toggle into the zoom mode, and then scroll the wheel to zoom in and out. Left click and slide around if I need to move the grid around anywhere, but that way you can zoom into something closer. So the Logitech 602, it has actually a little, one of these little adapters. That's how it links with your computer. There is a newer version of it, the Logitech 604 that they came out with. That can also be a Bluetooth mouse, and you can link that to multiple computers. You can link that to up to 3 computers. So if you're someone who uses multiple computers while you write, that might be beneficial for you. Next, I want to talk about, so that was great. That was one of the most useful things that sped up my writing. Another thing is graphics tablets. I might screw up some brand names as I talk here because I don't exactly know how to pronounce them, but we'll get close. Wacom, they make some really good tablets, probably the industry standard for tablets. So the way that these work is you're going to get a pen, and basically this whole thing is going to be mapped out to your screen. So wherever you scroll on this, the mouse is going to go. You can just tap, and that's like clicking your mouse. The pen's going to also include a few buttons on it, which can be shortcut buttons. And then the tablet itself is going to include a few shortcut buttons, all fully customizable. So again, you can set that to the shortcuts that you use the most often. The next thing I'm going to talk about is probably what sped up my writing process the most. And it was this tablet, and I'll kind of move over, scroll down here. Let me get this right. This tablet was called the Huion Canvas Pro. Basically, I looked at the Wacom tablets that have a screen. Instead of having to do this while I look up at the monitor, I wanted something that actually had a screen. So I can see Pyware, so I can see the grid on my screen and be able to touch wherever I want on the grid. That was just something that I thought would really speed up my writing process. Another cool thing about this is this also comes with a few shortcut buttons on the pen, fully customizable. And then there are 4 different shortcut buttons here on the side of this tablet here. So you can just, instead of having to scroll your mouse over to this menu, scroll it back down to this, scroll it up to this drop down, scroll it over to the toolbar, scroll it back to the grid. You can just move this. It's like having a piece of paper that was the grid, and you can just move all over it. It's sped up my writing process exponentially. And the next thing I want to talk about,
the display tablet that you're working with right now, was that a specific one that you're looking for, or was it just a inexpensive one you found on Amazon?
So the
Wacom, that one versus others.
So the Wacom one that I was looking for, the ones that had a display, we're coming up in the $700 range, $700 and more, which is more than I wanted to spend on a device to do this with. So I basically just got on Amazon and I looked for something that was comparable, but a different brand and a lesser price, and I found this. When I bought this, I was able to get it on Amazon for about $200. Mm-hmm. When I was looking earlier today, I think the cheapest that I found it on there was about $250. Okay. There are links for this. If you go on Amazon and you are interested in this, there's about 5 of the same different links, all at different price points. So make sure you look through those to find out which ones, which is the cheapest of the time. So because the link that the link that I purchased it with is not the cheapest one. So I did include, I think the link on the sheet is the one that I purchased it from, but do a little bit of searching if you are interested in that one.
We have a question about the tablet right now. Have you used, since the sketch functionality has been released, have you used the sketch functionality with this tablet yet?
I haven't yet. I've been playing around with a little bit of the sketch function. I just got finished with writing for WGI season, and so I've got a little bit of time now. Obviously, I've got a lot of bit of time now being at home and locked up. So the sketch function is definitely on my list of things that I do want to play with.
Along those same lines, do you find yourself, when using the tablet, using the pencil tool more, or do you to freehand forms, or do you actually use it with all the drawing tools?
I use it with all the drawing tools. I feel that you do have a lot of precision, and especially I do toggle between what step size it's going to, whether I want it on the whole step or going all the way to rounding to a 16th of a step. But the precision is high enough that I can use it, if I'm setting a linear form or setting a blocks. But it is also really nice to create those free drawing forms and not having to drag my mouse across it and just getting to use the pen.
Right, and a little more fluid because it's hand to paper essentially.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay.
Cool. Let me grab it. Cool. So the next thing I want to talk about is an app that I found. I think when I found this app, it was free. Now it's $5. But it's a great custom keypad app. And if you look, I'll show you the shortcut layouts that I created with this. I started with the first layout I ever created was that, if you can see.
Mm-hmm. And you just utilized our button images in there, it looks like?
Yeah, I utilized all the buttons. I had a bunch of shortcuts, as you can see. But what I realized from this one is there's a whole lot of buttons that I don't use. There's some shows that I can write the entire show, and I don't use those buttons. Right. So I went in and I recreated another one. So I took some of the buttons out that I used, but then I left a lot, and I added some shortcuts in there. Mm-hmm. And then my final draft, and this is the one that I actually currently use with when I've got Pyware open, I've got this on my desk, is I actually took all the buttons off because I realized I don't scroll the buttons that much. It's the shortcuts. And one of the hard things, as I mentioned with Pyware, is that since you can create so many shortcuts, I had a hard time remembering like what this shortcut was and what that shortcut was and what this shortcut was. So there's some shortcuts that I do have memorized. I'm not going to say what exactly they are because I've changed so many of the shortcuts that it's almost Control S is about the only thing that I've got the same. But that's another thing to note is that if there's a shortcut that you find yourself, or there's a function that you find yourself using it all the time, either look up the shortcut or change it to something that your brain immediately says, like, I think that this should be Control D, and set it to that. Because if that's what your brain immediately thinks that it is, then just set it to that function. So this is and with this app, you can basically create any layout you can create the buttons to be any size and any color you want. You can make the buttons do any function that you want them to do. So that's how I basically chose which features that I use the most often, which shortcuts I use the most often, and I laid all of those out.
To touch on the tablet, I assume is that a iPad or is it a...
This is an iPad. It's an iOS app. It can be used, I know for a fact it can be used on iPads, iPod Touches if you have one, and iPhones.
Okay. So when you're designing, how do you have that laid out? Or do you have it right next to your touchpad? Just trying to get your workflow down.
So I like having printed music. So usually you're looking at my typical layout is something like this, and then I'll have the music laid in front of me. So I can still get to the keyboard. I can reach the keyboard and do all this, but then I also have the shortcuts thing, and I have this. I would say that I'm using my tablet 80 to 85% of the time, and I'm switching to the mouse maybe 15% of the time.
Okay. And Josh, thanks for coming in. Yes, he has a mouse that has 9 buttons on it, and he has several shortcuts programmed to those. If you can show that again for Josh. There you go. He has 6 on the side and 3 additional on the top in addition to the 2 primaries.
If you read about that mouse, it says they have 11 customizable buttons. They're talking about customizing also the main 2, which I don't think anyone would ever want to change from their click features. So you're really looking at 9 customizable buttons.
Right. And Chris, with the iPad Pro and the pencil, yes, if you're running on a Macintosh, you can connect that to your Mac, and it can become the touchpad, the tablet that he is using Sidecar. Or if you're not using Mac, you can use Duet, and you can connect your iPad that way as well. Back to you, sir.
Awesome. So we'll keep on moving forward. We're going to move over to the, let's see,
We have a question from Russell right quick. On the graphics tablet, can you zoom into a smaller area? So for the visual graphics tablet, it works like a monitor. And if you'd like to touch on that a little bit, he's asking about zooming it in. So how do you combine the zoom function with the graphics tablet?
If I want to zoom in, I have to physically like have the zoom tool selected. It's there. It's I have to basically have the zoom tool selected and actually zoom in on the drill.
Right.
There's nothing with the tablet where you can actually zoom. So,
but once you're zoomed in, you're able to design on the tablet in the zoomed status.
Yes, that is correct. It would be just like having your monitor zoomed and you're mousing around there. You would have the tablet zoomed and you'd be penciling around there.
Wonderful. Thanks, sir.
Cool. So the next thing I want to touch on is you don't see it. Let me share my whole screen. All right. So the next thing I want to touch on is it's a program that I found, and it's called Radial Menu. The program has two parts to it. The program has this toolbar function, which you can see here. I can get rid of this. So the program has two functions. It has this Radial Menu function, which you can set to some whatever shortcut you want. I think I have Control-Shift-R brings it up, which I have as a button on my pen. So when you push this button, it comes up with this whole menu that's, again, fully customizable. So a lot like my mouse, I picked some of the tools that I use the most often. In fact, I picked all of the tools that I use the most often. I have my 3 pointer selections, pointer, box, and lasso. I have the 3 tools that I use the most often, push, adjust, and morph. And then I have my knife and glue tools. Additionally, it also has a toolbar, which you can set, I think it's 48 different menus. I just have an 8 by, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 by 1. And you can have it be anywhere in the anywhere on the monitor. Let me show that. So you can have the program this toolbar to be anywhere. I like to leave it right up here, so it's at the top of Pyware. The radial menu is going to appear wherever your mouse is when you bring it up. It's going to appear right at that. The toolbar is always going to be positioned in the same spot wherever you have it on the screen. So originally I had it over on the far right side. Now I have it up at the top. So
now on your pin device, how many buttons is on that device? Is it 2?
2. There's a top and a bottom button.
Okay, so the one of them is set to a normal left click, and the other one is set to your radial device or your radial menu.
So left click is just tapping onto the tablet.
Okay.
I actually have one button that if I hold and tap, it does a right click. And then my other button is the Control-Shift-R to bring up the radial menu.
I see. And Brian, was that the screen sharing or the iPad app for the custom keypad? I believe it's listed in that in the file we shared. There's a keypad app. It's called Custom Keypad.
Yeah, that'll take you to the website that has the app on it.
Perfect. Okay.
Cool. So going over the shortcuts, and again, these are shortcuts that are beyond just your normal save, copy, paste. Undo, which, as Mitch mentioned yesterday, is a fantastic addition to the program. So as I had mentioned, it's important to figure out when you're writing a show which shortcuts you use the most, or which functions you use the most, and assign shortcuts to those, or figure out what the shortcuts to those are. There's going to be a few universals that everyone is going to use as their shortcuts. Having the selection tools or knowing the selection tools, I think is great. The reason that I have all three of them as selection tools is I will often, depending on what the drill move that I'm working on is, I'll switch back and forth between making different tools my default tool. And to do that, all you need to do is right-click on a tool, and it's going to make that the new default tool. So a few that I think are absolutely essential is going to be the pointer, box, lasso, the knife and glue. Hide selection and show all, I think, is fantastic, because what I'll often do is, let's say I'm working on this block of people down on the right, I'll just select everyone else and hide those performers, so then I can do work with this down here.
I do have a question. With the devices that you have, how often do you find yourself going back to the keyboard itself?
I almost always have one hand on the keyboard and one hand on my tablet, simply so I can do things like shift and control if I need to select multiple groups of performers. There are a few shortcuts that I do use key functions on the keyboard. So my typical writing position is probably one hand on the graphics tablet and one hand on my keyboard.
And I know I get this question quite often, is how switching back from the mouse or back and forth, is it better on your arm for posture? And all of us suffer of some sort of carpal tunnel, as it were. Do you find it makes it easier on you for extended periods of time?
Yeah, I think that giving myself a variety of ways that I write alleviates some stress on my body. Just being able to switch back and forth from a pen to a mouse to a pen to a mouse.
Since we're on the computer for 14, 15 hours a day, as it were.
Yeah. I also I've made my desk into a standing desk just by mounting it up onto some cinder blocks. Mm-hmm. But I also have a high drafting chair by me, because every once in a while those long days of writing get a little long for standing there. So I'll stand for most of the day, but every once in a while I'll sit down also. So
right. Okay.
Cool. So just, we're at the hide and show all. I think lock and unlock is also useful. I don't think that I don't necessarily use those as often. I use the hide selection and show all. Usually I use the lock selection for props if they're on the field and they're not going to be moving. The pit, as Brooks had mentioned on Tuesday, I pretty much always put the pit in because I think it's just great to be able to visualize stuff. He had also mentioned about visualizing stuff, and I can't tell you how many ensembles where we're discussing how tall to make a prop. Do we want to make it 6 foot? Do we want to make it 8 foot? And putting it into this program will really help with that. It'll give you an idea of what it's going to look like and what you're going to see. We do that with my indoor group with Chromium Winds every year when we're doing our uniform and our tarp design. We at least put some semblance of what the uniform is going to be on top of what the tarp's going to be, so we can just get an idea of what that's going to look like. And so you've got it's not a 100% realistic view of what it's going to look like, but it's pretty darn close, and it's going to give you a great idea. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're designing. Pyware is a great tool for having your design meetings to throw something in there and see if that's going to work. So yeah, as I mentioned, just having the tools that you use the most often. Some tools that I end up using a lot, swap two positions. And if you've never used that before, it gives you the option. You can do it from this count to the end of the drill, from this count to the beginning of the drill, or at this count only. So the swap two positions is really helpful, especially because I often write backwards and I'll set up an impact and write back to the next moment. And, you know, when I'm at some spot, set up the next impact and just write backwards from it. So the swap two positions is a fantastic thing. Oh, I think it's also really important to have the snap to step size, the 1, the half, quarter, eighth, and 16th, just because there's so many times where it's just this linear form and you want to make sure that people aren't a quarter of a step off, and just setting that can solve all those problems. And then a few advanced shortcuts that I want to talk about is I have all my labels set up. First of all, when you assign a shortcut, I would suggest using some modifier with it, Control, Shift, because if you don't, you're gonna end up getting into problems. And I once programmed like a whole bunch of shortcuts, and I was like, oh, I'll just make it D and T and H. But then when you go to fill in text boxes or program sheets like that, you're just gonna be pulling up all sorts of tools, and it's gonna be bad. So add modifiers to your shortcuts. What I do with my label positions, because I don't really worry about labels until I finish the movement, and then I go back through and I clean everything up. So for instance, I have a drill here where all of the labels are just all over the place. And so what I've done is I've taken the number pad over on the right side of the keyboard, and I've made it so that each direction, 1, 4, 7, 8, 9, 6, 3, 2, the outer buttons are all in the direction of the label. So here I'll show you with the guard here. I'll select all of them. So if I can make the labels just go all the way around the positions. And that speeds stuff up so much more. I have the, I think it's divide and multiply are the different contours. Here, let's check with this. Yeah, if you see that the divide and multiply are just the different contours. I think plus is making the labels go further away, and then minus is making the labels come closer. And then I actually have Control 0 is whatever the labels were in the previous chart. So I can fly through all of this and just...
Kevin, could you turn on your camera so we can see what you're using on your keyboard? There we go. So if you can just kind of highlight where your shortcuts are for that.
Yeah, so it's basically this whole number pad all the way around here, and it's the...
So 1, 4, 7, 8, 9, 6, 3, 2 are all the directions.
Yeah, and I just hold down Control, and each direction is for taking the label to a different direction. And as I mentioned, the two different contours are divide and multiply. Mm-hmm. Labels closer is minus, labels further away is plus, and then whatever it was in the previous set is 0. So if I clean all these up,
mm-hmm.
Then when we go to another page where it's all messed up, if it's a hold and I want it to all be the same, I can just do the Control 0 and all the labels are fixed.
Wonderful.
And then the last one that I think is incredibly useful, and I have it set up on the bottom part of my app here. It's to lock the anchor range, to flip the writing direction, or to move the secondary or the primary anchors That's the yellow or the red anchors down at the bottom. 1 count in either direction. Before the introduction of the stagger tool recently, it kind of all had to be done like this. So the useful thing, the way that this would work is, like this. So if you lock the anchor range, you're going to see a lockdown at the bottom. You turn blue, and then you unlock it. We can make the secondary range just go up by 1 or down by 1. We can make the red anchor go up by 1 or down by 1. Let's say I want to write backwards, we can flip that. So that what that saves me from is having to go down here and just carefully slide it over to, and slide this one over to, and I can just, hit it back twice with the shortcuts that I have programmed in here.
Awesome. What's the lag like on that interface? Is it fairly quick?
Yeah,
I think it's wireless.
Yeah, for this app to work with your computer, because this app will work with either a Mac or a PC. There is a VNC client that you're going to have to install on your computer, and the app will walk you through how to do that. But there's almost no lag. I mean, as soon as I touch stuff, it's switched on the.
Awesome.
On the
Wonderful. That's really cool. All right. So what else do we have?
Yeah, so I mean, just making sure that you have your shortcuts really ironed out, and this can help someone who's writing one show, but this can exponentially help someone who's writing more than one show. And just keeping tabs of while you write, figuring out what stuff you use. As I mentioned, figuring out there's a few universal shortcuts that everyone should have and have memorized. The hiding selections, all the selection tools. But then just making a note of what tools you personally use the most, because every designer is going to have a different writing style. Every designer is going to have different tools that they use all the time. And while I might use the adjuster and the morph a lot, someone else might be using some different tools. So whatever tools those are, whether you grab some devices like this, or you're just using your keyboard and your mouse, identify a few of those shortcuts. And as I said, I had a difficulty remembering so many of these shortcuts that I thought could really speed up my writing process. So that's kind of why I tried all these different devices, and it was sort of a what's going to help me the most. And so it's sort of been a combination. Some I still use, some I don't use anymore, but I still think that they're useful tools for maybe another designer. But currently in my writing, I do use this app most of the time. I use this tablet all of the time now, and I use this mouse a lot of the time. So
the question I have would be, do you find yourself having different shortcut sets for the different styles of writing between indoor and marching band? Or is it pretty much universal?
It's pretty universal. I'll have different movements that I'll end up using more different tools. Ballads, I'll use a lot of adjuster, and just to get those scattered sets created. A lot more morph, and then a lot more block tools and line tools, especially when I'm doing openers and closers.
Awesome. Do we have any questions about the shortcuts or any of the devices? One device that I has come up before that isn't on the thing here would be a gaming keypad. Have you ever had experience with a gaming keypad? Thoughts?
I did. I used one, oh my gosh, way back when I was first started writing. I used one for a little bit. And I think the thing that I didn't like about that is it was just kind of 15 or 20 keys in some configuration, and I really couldn't get a pattern to it. I couldn't remember what did what, and it was just too many shortcuts that weren't labeled in a small area for me. So
changing to the iPad was much more effective for you.
Yes, where I could see what each tool was that I was hitting.
Awesome. One more call out for oh, here we go. We have a question about your computer and monitor. What computer do you have? What monitor do you have?
I have I believe it's the MSI GS65. And I have a Scepter. I think it's a 27-inch monitor. For a while ago, I had a curved monitor at one point. It was a 24-inch curved monitor. But what I learned is Pyware looks really weird. A grid looks really weird on a curved monitor. So I did switch away from that. But I do love the MSI runs Pyware like a dream. I was always using my MacBook for Pyware. But it was getting really hot. It was getting hot all the time, so hot. And I'd start Pyware and always get the chat. Do you want to turn off shadowing warning? I still use my Mac for almost everything, but I do use my PC for Pyware. So
I understand. Could you go through using the device, your touchpad, and kind of draw a free form or use a couple of the tools to show how that's input?
Yeah.
Just to kind of see. And if you can explain the little glove and
So the glove came with it. The glove is basically, it just makes it easier to move around on the screen so that my hand's not dragging on it. The Wacom tablets that I mentioned do have a touch feature, so you can turn that on and off. So it can also be like a giant touchpad. This has no touch capabilities. So
it's pin only. Okay.
Yeah. So you can see it's pretty. I mean, it's pretty accurate.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, the precision's there too. I mean, if I wanted to. So it's got great precision. It's so quick to use.
And I'm assuming it's pretty much the bread and butter for the adjuster tool.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely it is. And to connect to your computer, it has a
Is it an HDMI and a USB?
USB, HDMI, and an AC adapter. So it's one cord that splits off into three. And it also came with this stand. So this stand is adjustable to different heights and different angles. So it came with the stand. It came with this pen and this fancy holder and the glove.
We do have a question about eye strain on the tablet versus the smaller tablet versus the larger screen. Do you have an issue with that? It looks like the tablet might be a little dimmer than your primary monitor. Do you experience?
Yeah, I think those are settings that I have I've turned down anyways because I've experienced that. I think the brightness on my monitor is only at 30, and I think the tablet's somewhere around there too. Okay. So that it's just kind of a personal configuration that I don't want them.
I know some other designers use a different type of color scheme on your design grid. Do you use the default colors primarily, or?
Yeah, I've messed with some of the other colored ones, but they just seem strange to me. So I've always gone with what I'm familiar with, which is what I started with, which was this white grid.
The white and the blue, right?
Yeah. I do color. I will color my sections while I'm writing. I will have my woodwinds usually in like an orangish. I think I had it. Yeah. So let me have to use that. So I will usually have my woodwinds in an orangish color, my brass in a bluish color, my drumline black, and my guard pinkish. And if I really need to make sure that some sections or subsections are getting together, I'll change those colors. The same as if I'll need to make sure that, you know, let's say the horns and the tenor saxes need to get together in 4 sets. I might make all of the horns and all of the tenor saxes green so that I can just make sure that all of those dots end up together. One thing I didn't mention earlier that I do like to do is I like to get rid of both the secondary dots and sometimes the labels, because sometimes I write with all of my positions as dots. The differentiating on which are different instruments and all that, it's all in the label. I do like A something, F something, C something with numbers. So I can shut the labels off, and it's all just smooth like this. The other thing that sometimes irritates me is when I'm writing right on top of where the previous set was, and you have the dots on top of the secondary positions. And that's when I like to toggle off. Oops. The secondary dots, just because I know that they're coming from right over there. And then this will just kind of clean stuff up, and then I can turn it back on once I'm done making this look pretty and making this look how I want it to look. But yeah, hiding those things is I turn those on and off, the labels and the secondary dots all the time.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions for Kevin? Let's see what we got here. It looks like, I don't know if we have any. We may be good. That was wonderful.
Awesome.
Well, no, we had one last in here. How long does it take for you to write a show on average?
I have never kept track.
Yeah.
I have never kept track of the hours that it takes me. I can usually, if it's a bigger band, over 200, it'll usually take me a couple of days to crank out a movement. If it's a smaller band, it's less than 75. I can usually crank out a movement in less than a day. So,
depending on size, obviously.
Yeah, and that's not the times that I was writing in, 6 or 7 years ago. It was taking me a lot longer, and that's when I had a lot more groups, and I just wasn't doing stuff on time. So I took a step way back in the activity, just to kind of learn these whole shortcuts and how to write drill faster. And I think planning out, knowing what you want to do, because I kind of, before I used the program to figure out what I wanted to do, but now I have my ideas in my head before I start attacking this. So it's not just, all right, let's see where this is going to go. I kind of know where I want it to go. And then the program will just help me make that possible.
Right. We have a question. After using the 13-inch touchpad, would you recommend that small one or getting a larger one?
For this screen?
Yes, for that screen.
Yeah, I think this is a great size. I probably wouldn't go any smaller than this with having the video on it and or the display on it and wanting to see the grid. I probably wouldn't want it to get much smaller than this, but this size is just fine for me.
Another question is, do you normally have your real view on a secondary monitor?
Yeah.
So which one? It's normally on your laptop screen?
Yeah, it's actually on there now. You just can't see it because
because of the angle. Okay.
Yeah, but so these two monitors are going to be mirrored, and then this one has the real view on it.
I see.
Yeah, I have a real hard time writing on the go. I have a really hard time writing with only one monitor, where I have to have the real view on top of the grid. I really like having two different spaces.
Would you mind giving a quick overview on how to assign buttons in Radial? Could you show us how to do that right quick?
Yeah. On the Radial menu?
On the Radial menu, yes, sir.
So you basically have to pull up the settings here. And then with each one, you just right click on each button and you can change the name of it, what the actions do, if you want any different modifier keys, and then what key it's going to be pressing.
And basically, you're just mapping that to whatever you've assigned in the shortcuts editor.
That is correct. So you'd have to basically use this list here. Which is where all the shortcuts are,
right.
For anyone who didn't know that. This is basically the list of every function in Pyware that you can assign a shortcut to, and then what you want the shortcut to be. And for instance, if you go into something and you try to assign something that's already taken, it's going to tell you that that's already taken. It's going to tell you what that function's taken by. So if you want to go in and remove that function and make it into this, but that's where all the shortcuts are. It's in that drop-down menu under utilities.
Also, if there's any items that don't have a shortcut that you want to have a shortcut, please contact us and we can have that added to the software. How many Radial or how many divisions can you have in the Radial menu?
8.
8.
So the Radial menu can have 8. The toolbar menu, I think it can be like up to a 10 by 10 maybe, so 100. But then it's going to be gigantic. You can also configure how big you want these to be. So for both menus, you can configure one of these is to figure out how big you want the button. You can make the buttons bigger or larger if you'd like.
Awesome. And color code everything and whatnot.
Yeah.
So that you can actually add images to that, so that might be beneficial for some people.
And then the same thing with the toolbar. You can customize it. You can add images.
Great. Josh, does that cover your questions on how to create something there? Are there any other questions? Dan, there is not a shortcut to add a subset. There's you can turn on you can assign a shortcut to open your page tab bin and place a tab, but there's not a shortcut to adjust this. You would have to either right click on the page tab and then select to be a sub page tab, or if you open up your production sheet, there's a checkbox there.
There is a shortcut where if you hold down Alt and just click on the line on the timeline here, you can create page tabs. The same thing if you do Control Alt and click them, you can delete them.
A funny story about those is I input those to make it quicker for me to add tabs for testing. And they just kind of got left in there.
Well, we're grateful that it got left in there.
So were there any other questions about any of the apps or any of the devices that we've gone over tonight? Or anything that you'd like to see re-demonstrated if you stepped in a little bit late? All right, everybody. Well, thank you all for stopping by. Kevin, it's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for doing this for us. It was a wonderful session. So we will see y'all on Monday. We'll have master classes next week, and then we'll have night school on Wednesday. So if y'all have any questions until then, please reach out to us, Facebook or anything like that. Kevin, would you be able to share the files for your iPad app?
Yeah.
Are those shareable? If you can send those to me, I can get those out to anybody who'd like to have those. And
I'll send those to you along with the shortcut configuration that I have in Pyware, because without that, the buttons won't really line up.
Exactly. So we can put that package together for anybody who wants it. So, all right. Well, thank you so much again, Kevin.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. And y'all have a wonderful evening.
Take care.
Bye-bye.